shoppers, but they were losing money. There were Dipman and Malpas all over the country. And I think Havant was the last one to survive. And he did it by going out of that and going into fancy goods, lovely fancy china, and chocolates, all sorts of nice goodies. But even that wasn't good enough. So you will see with this picture, he's about to go and the whole building is going to be pulled down. And that's what came in its place. A shop with lots of flats or apartments over the top. This is opposite, near enough, what used to be Woolworths, just down the road from the church, really. We've come down to Bedhampton now. This is near the Bedhampton gates. And that was a school in a house which had become the Froebel House School. And it was really quite an upmarket children's school, junior, infants and junior. And a Miss Porter used to run it. And she was a lovely lady, but she did rule the children with the rod of iron, as the saying goes. Kindly disposed, though. It was a good school, very nice school. And that is the houses that were built when that was pulled down. And if you look right in the far right, you can just see the pub, the Prince of Wales. Hard to see. And the most popular classroom was the classroom on the wall. It only took about 10 pupils, as you can imagine. And that was very, very popular. All the children wanted to go to that. Mind you, being a private school, they were quite small classrooms anyway, with very, very, very good teaching. And as I'll say, that was a popular one. When it all went down, the wall remained, the houses that were developed, that's the back of the houses you saw earlier, and the actual shed which housed the class has actually gone. That was the area, the whole area, when it was being developed. And you can see the Portsmouth Water Company main building and pumping station. They've always been in that area for a long, long time. They've owned the whole block, not this block in front, but the block behind. And that's where they've rebuilt on that site that I was just showing. It's either Knox Road or the road running down to Knox Road. Just to put it in geographic position, just going from Havant down to the Bedhampton level crossing. We're in West Street still. I call it West Street West, which was from the traffic lights onto the gates. But this is almost at the gates. And that was a lovely post box. The West End, which was the West End of West Street. And there was a post office there, a little tiny post office, sub-post office, I should say. It was just in the front room of a lady who had a house I haven't got a photograph of the house. All I've got is the post box that was outside. But the house was in that building, which still looks fairly similar. It's the residence now. After the post office went, it was 2 or 3 of the small terrace houses, one of which was the post office, were knocked into one, and it became a store, West End store. And then the store went, and then it became that house. So things moving on all the time in Havant, as everywhere else. That was the central garage. We're going down nearly at the level crossing gates now. And that wasn't my photograph because that was taken about 1938. It's just a snapshot I was given, and I scanned it in to put it with my pictures. And that's a more modern picture taken from exactly the same position, which became Seaward's garage. And I think it's a different, not sure it is Fiat now. Of course, they keep changing the cars that they deal with, their dealership. This was the Rachel Maddox School, which was a school for handicapped children. Very, very good one. It was mentally and physically handicapped, and they had a very, very good name in the area. It did become a very, very good school. As a point of interest, look beyond it. You can see that house on the left, and you can see the tall chimney on it. You're going to see that later in about. Incidentally, most of these pictures, the early pictures, were taken in roughly the middle of 1950 up to the middle of 1960. So, and most of them I should think in about 1958. As it happened, it was in the early days of my photography, and I was fortunate enough to get asked to take lots. Well, I was friendly with the chief reporter for the evening news in Havant, and he introduced me to taking photographs for the news, the Portsmouth News. At that time, they did have their own professionals, but they were so stretched they couldn't take all the photographs. So a lot of these early pictures were taken during my period taking pictures for the news. In fact, virtually all of these, because, you know, I was a young photographer with children trying to earn a living, and it was quite hard graft at times. I needed all the work I could get, and working for the news was the best thing I ever did. I think I only used to get 50 shillings a picture. So I was really working for peanuts, but it did get me out and about. You know, I was getting known in the churches. I was photographing, you know, church functions and different things. And through this, I was being introduced to weddings. And of course, they were the mainstay of my work, and portraits. So I've always been mainly social photographer. And so the news, although I was working for peanuts, was very worthwhile because it did get me out and about and being seen, you know, and people thought, oh, well, if he's working for the news, he must be all right. So, you know, we'll have him to take pictures. So this is how it happened. So don't forget those chimneys. That's what it developed. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to move to that because that in sequence should be the next picture. Sorry, there's only 2 lots that are out of sequence, and that happens to be one of them. That's the house without the chimney. Now, these were taken about 20 years ago. And after that, of course, things have moved on again. So some of my pictures, Rachel Maddox has closed at this stage, and that's about to be pulled down. And then when it did get pulled down, that's what came. More apartments.
Where's that?
And this, Anne's just asked me where it is. It's near where that Bedhampton post office and shop was, down near the Prince of Wales, Knox Road area. Now, this is West Street, very similar. In fact, it pairs almost with the picture which was advertising this in the Corona Chronicle. And this is just an aside. Aren't you lucky to have that Chronicle? Isn't it a wonderful magazine? Oh, really, Anne and I really do enjoy reading that, reading the stories, reading the sermons. You know, every page is good, interesting. But anyway, back to the talk, slideshow. That was the Pelham Library, which is now a cafe. More current picture showing it as a cafe. Clark's shoe shop, as it was then. I think it's still a shoe shop,
Yeah.
but it's a different, it's probably
Just closed. It's just closed, Michael.
Well, that's sad. That's the story of Havant at the moment. So much has changed since I took these photographs. We've gone down now. We're in the 50s photographs. Again, these are pictures I did for the news. The gates were closed. They were doing work on it. There's still the gates that swing open, not the barriers. And they weren't changing that. It was still swing gates after this photograph was taken. But they were doing work on the railway. Look at New Road, though. Look how narrow it was then, you know, compared with now. And look at it, a lovely old lorry, you know, which is being used by the railway. That really is an antique. That's going back to the 20s. And you can see the road is much wider. And of course, by this time, this is about 25 years ago when I took this picture. You've got the swing down. The gates, the swinging gates have gone. You've got the barrier. Another picture taken at the same time, looking the same way. And we're looking back to the central garage again. So looking back towards Havant. And that's it. At that time, about 20 years ago, 15, 20. That was an exciting day. Oh, by golly, did I earn my 50 pence that day. I spent about 3 hours waiting for that to fall. And he did it they found it in the traditional way. They cut away most of the bottom, but had it propped up with wooden props, and then they set fire to it. So, of course, the wooden props burnt, and then gradually it eased itself down. And they cleared a path. They knew exactly where it was going to fall. And in the old days, I was quite proud of this because I got 3 pictures as that was going down. And the early Leicas, you didn't have any lever wind or any automatic wind or anything like that. Each one I had to whirl a knob round and then take the picture, whirl the knob round, picture. And again, I managed to get 3 as it was falling. That was the best one. And that's roughly where it fell, which is, I can't be positive, but very, very roughly there. And beyond there would be the waterworks, the old pumping room, pumping station. That was my first studio. Well, it was hardly a studio. It was more a processing place and a reception area. I could take passport photographs in there, but that was about the limit, because that was the width of my property. It was very, very tiny. But I mean, what else could you expect for 50 pence? 10 shillings in the money of the time, 10 shillings a week. And that was my start.
That was your rent.
Yeah, and I stuck there for about 6 years, 6 or 7 years, and then I found another property that I could rent for about a couple of pounds a week, but a lot bigger, so that's much more suitable. And that's what it looks like now. How can I describe it? Near enough opposite the Black Dog, which is gone. Well, that's all apartments now. And that was opposite. That was one of the shoe repairers, believe it or not, in the background. And I took the picture for the guy with the cart who worked for the urban district, the Havant and Waterloo Urban District Council, and he was about to retire, and I took the picture for the news. But it just caught a picture in the background of Cuffs, the shoe repairer. He had a lovely smart car. And you'd hardly believe it with a building like that. But he was a very good shoe repairer. And that's where it was. It's now developed. That has moved on. And there's apartments there now, which I've got to go and photograph. But I haven't done it as yet. Oh, I've had that one before. Where is that? Yeah. That's West Street. Let's see the Pelham Library again. Again, the same view. And then that's the same shoe shop that we'd seen earlier. And Mary Rose Walls. And I can't remember the guy's name. It was Binstead or something similar. I don't know if anybody here can come up with a name, but he was certainly one of the characters, one of the well-known characters of Havant. The shoe shop. And Mackay's, which is now the pound shop. We've moved down to what I call West Street West. And that was my hairdresser. He was almost opposite where I had my studio. And That was, and you got the stream running down right next to it. They pulled him down and then put that row of shops. And the stream has been buried. The stream is running underneath that, the hair shop, which had been a camera shop. It used to be a camera shop by a guy called Jeff Moodle. Pretty good one.
Just to jump in there, Mike, I noticed your reference to on the previous photo to George Carroll, the builders, and folks may not know that, of course, he also started Carroll's Funeral Directors, and he was a church warden at the church. And a couple of years ago, when we sanded the floors in the sanctuary, we found his signature penciled onto the floors, onto the floorboards in our sanctuary. It's from the time when he was a church warden. Just interesting to see where his builder's yard was.
Yes. Oh, well, yes, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, Carroll, quite honestly, I think Carroll still owns this whole area. They used to say that he owned half of Havant. You know, they were they were builders, but they were also property owners. And as you say, it's the same people that were did the funeral directors, and they're still around. Their sons are, I think they're all out of the business now. I think they're all retired, but they're based around the Langston area. Hallgo, that was part of Sparshetts, the garage people. And it was David Sparshett that was running this Hallgo. And he had lots of imported Italian scooters and mini cars.
Three-wheelers.
Michael, J.R. Hunt, the hairdresser, is still going at the back of this building in Brockhampton Lane.
Sorry?
He's still going in Brockhampton Lane.
Who?
J.R. Hunt, the hairdresser.
That's his son.
Yes, exactly. It's J.R. Hunton's son now.
Oh, yeah, Jess Hunt, yes. Yes. Oh, yeah, we're talking about different guy. That hairdresser, yes.
Yes. Just behind the hire centre.
That's right. If you can catch him. They're always out fishing. He's a great... Yeah, but you're quite right. And he was, I think George Carroll was very good to him because he may own or had owned half of Havant at that stage, but he was a very good landlord. And when Jess had to leave that hut, he did give, he organised, in part of this development. I don't know whether we see it in this next picture. Oh, no.
Round the back of it.
Yeah, it's round the back of the house. And well, I think we do have a picture of it in a minute. But we've gone to West Street now. We're looking down at Curry's. Curry's had moved from where they were in opposite the church. And at this stage, they were still selling bicycles, as you can see. There was a bike there, and the Midland Bank had moved down, which had, of course, later on became the HSBC, which is there, but it's at that stage now it's extended it's taken on 2 properties to become bigger. And then, of course, it moved again to where Halfords had been, at the other side of the traffic lights, the other side of the pedestrian crossing. So things have moved around. Now, this is a really historic picture, and there's very, very few people that will remember this. This was the old, they called it Civic Restaurant. All over the rest of the country, starting from World War II, they had these British restaurants, you know, which used to feed the workers or people, anyone that was hungry. And you used to go to a cash counter, first of all. You'd pay your money and they'd give you counters. So you get, say, 1 and 6 for a main course, 2p for a cup of tea or coffee. Well, I think it was 2p for tea, 3p for coffee, and 6p for a pudding. And you had those different colour vouchers, and then you went, queued at the counter and got your food. When it ceased, another builder, this was a Hayling Island builder, Sylvester, took it over, and it became one of the very, very first do-it-yourself shops in the country. There were not very many of them. And then that moved on to, I can't think the name, the Covers. And then, of course, it got knocked down when they developed the whole area. We moved on now, we're jumping about a little bit. That's the Crossroads. The main road, the A27, was still running at this time. It's well before the bypass. And of course, this was the main road that all the traffic, South Coast traffic, had to come through. But it was even worse for Emsworth because they didn't have the short bypass at Emsworth, let alone a big bypass, and everything had to wriggle round the shops. And it really was a wriggle in Emsworth. And that's one of the first supermarkets that I can remember ever seeing fine fare. That name has disappeared totally. And at one stage there were 2 fine fares in Havant. This one, a slightly smaller one, and then there was one in Market Parade. More about that a bit later on. And that's a view, a later view. Looking West Street West now, it had been partially developed on the left, but not fully. That was my second studio. I'd moved up from down there to this one next to the Cobden, and I spent nearly an evening working on printing and such like. I used to joke with the publican about putting a hatch through from the pub to my dark room. But no, I had to go round and get my pint, which I used to enjoy. And I used to look with interest at this property where Mr. Weald run it as a tobacconist and sweet shop. And then Brix's was a general shop and nursery. But anyway, I took over that one, so that's where I moved on. And I had quite a long time there. But eventually, that fell into my hands, and I managed to buy it. It didn't cost a lot of money, but it had become almost derelict when I bought it. So I had to spend rather more on it, on restoration, than I ever spent on buying the original property. Sorry, my mouse slipped then. But anyway, we've moved on. This is opposite, and we're looking down West Street. So this is West Street West we're in.
Mike, is that shop that was your last one, is that the one that's now the 1940s tea room?
Yes.
Yes.
And very good it is.
Mm.
Yeah. And long may they remain, because that is part of my pension. Not only that, she's a jolly lovely lady, you know, and I try to be a kind landlord to her, as I have done previous tenants. But no, that is, and that will stay in the family, because my son is keen on buying it. So I would only want to keep it in the family. So that sounds great. That was the old council. We're back on that crossing again. It's still the main road going across. This is the north and south Park Road south, looking across at Park Road North, traffic light junction, but lots of works going on, developing it. On the right is, you know, what eventually became, it was a furniture showroom originally, but then that became McDonald's, and they were the main council offices here. Planning was there and behind, but that all came down, and then that became job centre, and now it's a pub. So things move on. In the development, we're now looking northwest. That's where Halfords and then the bank came, and they're going to cut that tree down, which they had to do, you know, to widen. They couldn't have widened the road without. So that's part of the development going on. That's the area after development. The tree's gone. The road's now very, very much wider. Well, you've seen this picture before. This is now West Street. Traffic, well, shall we say behind me, diagonally across the road is McDonald's. That was the vegetable shop. And that was one of the other photographers. Now that was Dorothy Marshall. I was very cheeky actually, opening up so close, because I'm only about 50 yards further over the other side of the road.
Dorothy Marshall.
Dorothy Marshall. But she was a lovely lady. She didn't bear me any grudge at all. We used to get on very, very well. You know, we used to do favours for each other. Our type of work was totally different. She was the real old school, and she was good at it. You know, she had great big plate cameras, and her pictures were quite static. If she photographed a wedding, all the people had to go into the studio. It's bigger than it looks, because although that was her facial, I think she had from there to there was all Dorothy Marshall's. But she had quite a big studio there, and she used to take quite big wedding groups in there. The one where there was perhaps a bit of animosity was between Dorothy Marshall and Peter Graham, who was the other. There were just three of us in those early days. And Peter Graham had worked for Dorothy Marshall. So that was a little bit more delicate. But, she didn't bear any malice to me at all. We got on really well. And I got on well with Peter Graham. But, we had no axe to grind with any of them. Move on. And that's the area now. Or at least it's the area now, but quite a lot of this has been pulled down. As you can see by this picture. And it's changed since the picture. It keeps evolving. Etan. Some of the ladies may remember when Etan had a shop in Havant. And very popular it was too, I think. And it didn't catch me in there very often, though. And that's where Etan was, which at this stage was a money shop. Again, I think that's where it's been developed. Or not developed, it's been knocked down, awaiting developing. This is the back. More or less we talked about Chest Hunt earlier. Chest Hunt would have been the other side behind these buildings, main road. And this is it. No, I don't show his shop. Chest Hunt had a little lock-up premises just about where my mouse is. Just round the corner from it. And this is the back of all those shops. At this stage, that was Halford's. Then a bank. And I can't think what it is now. I think it's still empty. Wadsworth. Some of the older residents will remember him. There were just the two chemists at that stage. Davis, who's still there, at least Davis isn't, but it's still under that same badge, shall we say. But Wadsworth, it was a Mr. Wadsworth that used to run that. Very nice guy. And he had his garden, we're in West Street now, his garden run all the way back to Elm Lane, where the bus depot is. Again, that's showing rough. I think the chemist would have been there. It's a job to tell, but if you look back at it, you see it's a low build. That's very, they were just 3 or 4 shops of low buildings. And the last one in that row was Eric Keast. And I seem to remember having tea with you all. Not this Monday, we didn't have tea, did we? The previous Monday. And somebody was talking about Eric Keast. And that was a pram shop. And that's where it was. This is interesting. This really was the start of the Bosmere doctor's practice. At this stage, it was the doctor's surgery was in this building. I think by this time it had just moved. It was a pretty derelict building, but I don't think it was quite as derelict as this. And I haven't got a picture of it, but they had roughly here, in this area, the first of the proper modern doctor's practice. And it was just 3 doctors then. It was Dr. Dewhurst, Dr. O'Flynn, and Dr. Flynn, and the
Pearson.
one.
Pearson.
No, it's before Pearson.
Oh, I don't know.
Thomas. Doctors. Anyway, it's 3 doctors.
If I can throw in, Mike, just again a point of general interest for those who don't know that within St Faith's churchyard is the Dewhurst Memorial Garden, which is named after Dr. Dewhurst, I believe. It was established in his honour.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, of the partnership, he would have been the first one to retire because he was the oldest. Yeah, it was Thomas, Dr. Thomas, Dr. Mac. I said the name just now. Oh, don't get old, you get forgetful. And Dewhurst. But anyway, their surgery was the first modern surgery here. But that had been knocked down before I took my photographs, because then they shared the building at the back of the Havant Methodist Church near the police station, you know, the Havant Health Centre. And then, of course, Bosmere broke away from that, and they're down in Solent Road. You know, so they've developed into a very, very major practice. But that was the origins. The origin was in their house. And that's near enough what's there now. This is a bit nearer to home for St Faith's. One of the May Day parades. I imagine it's May Day. They had all sorts of parades with services, you know, going to the church and having civic services. Here again is another picture where the doctor's surgery used to be. I think I've gone backwards then. Opposite the church, Dolphin. That's near enough the entrance to the Meridian. And that was a lovely old hotel, actually. But it had to be pulled down for development. It had got a little bit derelict, a little bit seedy, but actually it was quite a lovely one. And Michael Lote, the optician, that was a very tiny entrance, but he had quite palatial rooms up above. Never got a picture of the what do you call it, the arcade. But a very, very, this was taken just before it was all going to be pulled down to make way for the Meridian Centre. But this was a very, very successful shopping area. They were all small businesses. There was a good leather shop here, and there was Mike Todd. He was a nurseryman. A wool shop, a very good wool shop in this area. And further back was Stan Head, which was a very good photographic camera shop, amongst others. But they were 4 that I can... Oh, and Frank O'Reilly, who is still going. Frank isn't, I regret, but the business is round near enough where the cursor is at the moment, round the corner beyond here in Market Parade. And then we're looking at the meridian, which took that all over inside the meridian. Another parade, you can see the church, St. Faith's Church, in the background. And also the,
Lovely little bus.
yeah, lovely old bus. It was wasn't a sort of bus, it was just where they parked buses, really. And it was a car park, which became the multi-storey car park. And with buildings that you can just see our church, St. Faith's. And at this stage, Carroll had moved, that was Carroll's main office. You know, Carroll, the builders and funeral directors. Night shot, a very exclusive ladies' shop, Elizabeth Myers. That's it in daylight. Just property now, offices below, I think, and probably apartments above. This did cause commotion in Havant. This was a massive load that was being transported. I'm not sure from where, but it was going to Southampton, to the docks. Well, possibly Chichester, that's where it fabricated by Chichester.
International.
But they had guys going along in front of it with long poles, and they were having to push telephone lines up, you know, so that they wouldn't foul up with that. So it really did go through quite slowly, and they had to have a revolving, you know, it was moving, closure of the A27 as it was going along. So it really did create chaos, but it got there in the end. And that's where it was negotiating. But that would have previously had to have negotiated Emsworth Town, which would have been even more sticky. Gazebo at the back of West Street, the back of East Street, I should say, very near where the cinema used to be. And that was it after the council had restored it, shortly before this picture was taken. Prince George's Street, that all became part of Waitrose, but I think they had to more or less pull that down and rebuild it. But they rebuilt it in the same style and joined it in with Waitrose, which is on the left. Ouch. Oh, it's like this, officer. I'm sorry, I didn't see the car coming. But anyway, not interested in that. It's the road itself, because that's Church House. Still is. These properties are all about to be pulled down for eventual development. It took quite a long time. And where Waitrose was Preston Watson on the left. That's the view. When I took these photographs, originally, Waitrose on the left. This part's unchanged. That was a sort of waste ground, which became a sort of bit of a car sales area. And then that became developed. So that's more or less, it's still taken about 5 or 6 years ago, but it's how it looks now. Another historic one, and people just don't believe this. This was the Havant Council, well, Havant and Waterlooville Urban District Council. I think this is one of their last meetings before we became a borough. And I don't know whether the council commissioned me or the news, but I know I took this photograph with permission. It's quite a long exposure. It was probably about half a second. So we didn't have the high-speed films in those days, not like the digital cameras nowadays. And so at a word from me, everybody froze just what they were doing. And they managed to hold that for about half a second while I took my picture. And this, believe it or not, is now the Bench Theatre.
At the Spring.
At the Spring, yeah, as Anne's just said. It's hard to believe, taken from the same place, this little balcony was the balcony over the centre. You see all those lights along, they've all been boarded up, and it became the Bench Theatre. I took it to the Spring, and nobody believed me until I got them to go on the top of those steps and then pointed out one or two bits and pieces, and you know, it's so obviously I was right. Just one or two of the Hailing Billy. That was the train, lovely one of the train. That's where the train used to go down through, which is now car parking. This is the end of Elm Lane, I think, was it? Is it Elm Lane? It's near you, Valerie. South Street's running across there. I think it's Elm Lane. Prior to developing, Grove Road. Grove Road. I've got the name right now. Incidentally, see that tree? A little stump. So it revived very nicely, and that's the development. But the rest of the road is pretty well unchanged. That's looking towards the old rectory. The bypass, the A27 bypass, cuts across where this picture was taken. Again, it's just, the bypass is just beyond that, the greenery. Bosmere School, that's the old Bosmere School, very close to the bypass. That's a couple of pictures of that, and that is a modern Bosmere, which was, probably still is. I was very impressed with the building. Havant Mill, I think that's pre my pictures. That's an earlier picture. That's roughly where it was. Freddie Vine, the butcher, who Waitrose wanted the site. They wanted, it's part of their development, and he wanted too much money for Waitrose to pay, and I think it delayed Waitrose by about a year. But eventually, I think he got his money. Good for him. Freddie Vine, the demon butcher, as I used to call him. And that's where that was taken. McFall's, that was a very good gents outfitter. Hardly changed. That's the building. It's a estate agent now. Jessamine House down the road, and there was one of the butchers. And that's when that came down, when that was pulled down, that was the other end of the Meridian Centre with Wilkinson's. That's Elm Lane. Yeah, sorry, this was Elm Lane, not where I sit previously. The Congregational Church, as it was then, because it's United Reformed, as we all know now. And most of those have been pulled down. That's the modern picture. But they only put a car park in it, so that's never really done much with pulling it down. And they stuck it out. He was the Smith and Vosper. He delivered bread to the houses, and he was the driver, and he stuck it out. Everything had been pulled down round him, and his house was still standing, and he didn't want to. I don't think he was standing out for money. He just didn't want to go, but eventually he had to. And as I say, that's all that went there. They didn't make much use of the land, just for a car park.
Can I just interject there?
Yeah.
Those houses that were knocked down there must have been built after 1890, because when the Congregational Church bought that land, they could have had the land right up to the park. It was a stonemasons, but the minister at the time wanted to open the church free of debt, and they wouldn't take the risk. So
Well,
those houses weren't that old when they were actually knocked down, were they?
no, in that case, they were. Yeah. Oh, thank you for that little pearl. Yeah. No, this
My
is
brother's in this picture.
really, yeah. Yeah. This is just before the market was actually pulled down. In the last year of the market, again, one of my evening news pictures. But of course, they had a cattle market. They had an auction every week, you know, general auction as well as auction for cattle. And the Boy Scouts did one of their fundraising. And of course, that's what became of it. And I think it's all going to be pulled down again. Progress. This was one of the early progress shots of Market Parade. You can see the United Reformed Church in the background. It's a bit more developed now. Very early stage in that development. The United Reformed Church. It's well and truly shows up, and that's much earlier in the first bit of the building, and that bigger framework was where the other fine fare shop established itself, which is the building which is Iceland. The council nursery, which is at the back of Havant Park, almost running underneath the bridge that goes over the railway, Park Road North. There's the railway bridge above. That's what it looks like now. They were felling a tree by the council office, which was in this area. Fine Fair, a better picture of Fine Fair. Just after they'd created a pedestrian precinct of West Street, so the bypass would be open by now. This is going down Brockhampton Lane. It's all the area where Stents. That was the leather work, leather tannery. Just showing us some of the primitive equipment. The Black Dog, when it was a pub, then it became the, can't quite read it.
The courthouse.
Courthouse, that's it, yeah. And then it became apartments. That's Brockhampton Road, believe it or not, in the 60s. This is the road running down to the industrial estate and the industrial area. And that's it more recently. So that wall, that garden wall on the right, the left is unchanged. So that's obviously it's come down and people have lost a lot of garden, you know, to create that wider road. Oh, that was the commemoration stone for the dedication of the St. Thomas Church, or St. Nicholas Church Hall, which was part of St. Thomas Church, Bedhampton. So that's off Park Lane, Bedhampton.
That's when clergy knew how to come out in force, I'll tell you.
Yes, they were all the clergy for the area. And that was part of the development going on. The latter on the left was all part of ex-Admiralty. I think it was a canteen. And that's the new church hall that's been built, which was also a church, you know, a supplementary church. So it had St. Nicholas, I believe, and you can see the cross there. And that's it in its glory when it was finished. And the old buildings that have been, you know, restored. So it made it a whole nice unit. We had loads of these going on. Yeah, you know, obviously one of my evening news pictures. That was by the Belmont, long gone. And that's the roundabout there now. We're now looking, you see on the right is the Belmont and going up Bedhampton Hill. Coldman Stores on the left, and this again is pre-bypass time, so all the traffic had to go through here, and that's it now. It's much wider, but you haven't got the traffic because you've got the bypass. Bypass is just starting to be worked on, I think, here, and they used to call this, I can't think it's Fir Tree Corner or One Tree Corner, but this is the main road coming round A27. And that's it now, which is just like a little cul-de-sac, just used for parking. We're in Petersfield Road now. That's it as it used to be. The new Havant Methodist Church, just before it was commissioned. And that was it being worked on. Lee Park House, took it just before it got pulled down. And that's all that remains there now, just the terrace. Now that's in the garden. You can see that from the Petersfield Road, and it's really hardly changed. Hailing Billy, at Langston. That's where it used to cross the road. Floods, well, nothing changes. There's always been flooding at Langston, and probably always will be. That's it without the floods. Rather more modern picture. I could tell a story, but it would last too long. The taking of this, but needless to say, the train did stop. I'd been put off on the previous train, and then the train stopped to pick me up after I'd taken the picture. I had to come down quickly. I had the station master from Havant with me, so he had to obey. And that's where it was taken from, up the top of the... at this stage, the signal, which had become very derelict, but interestingly, the council realised its significance, the big significance that Michael Edwards had gone up that signal box to take that previous photograph. And you see it had really got into a bad state. And they reinstalled it. But they didn't put a plaque to me. I wonder why. But anyway, it's good to see it. Now, I would be quite happy to go up there again. Cleves Garage, that was halfway down Hayling Island. We haven't got too much longer to go now. We're well on the way. Soon get your tea, coffee, and I'll be ready for one, or a beer. Probably a beer. Esso Garage, halfway down Hayling. Very derelict now. Just a workshop. Children.
Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, people always manage to work out whose children these are. As half of you are muted, I'll tell you, it's Charlie Chaplin's children. They were on holiday with their mother. What was it, Una?
Yeah.
Una, yeah.
Una.
I don't think Charlie was around, but she certainly was. And she gave permission for me to take the picture, again for the evening news. And it was taken almost opposite the Royal Hotel where they were staying. And it was the convent then, or ex-convent, I believe, because I think it was being used as an annex to the hotel. And that, I happened to pick that up a couple of years ago. One of the children that was in that, the daughter, a modern picture. She was into art, as you can guess. And that's where they were taken. That's where the convent was. Not that building, that's a modern building. The Royal Hotel, as it was when it was a hotel, it's still standing, but it's all apartments now. Beach cot, right down on the seashore. Now, when I took that photograph, I thought, give that another year, 2 years, the sea will take that over, because you can see it's cutting right in. How wrong I was. Council spent a lot of money putting sea defences around it, and it became the inn on the beach, halfway along Hayling Island. Just about 2 or 3 pictures now. Not my pictures, obviously, but Havant's also had lots of flooding over the years. East Street, lovely picture of East Street. an aerial picture taken before World War II. You see streets very, very clearly. No, I'll tell a lie. It was after World War II, but it's not my picture. I've done aerial pictures, but that wasn't mine. St Faith's Youth Club. David Slater was a very, very popular. He wasn't a vicar, he was a curate, but he took a lot more weddings than the vicar at the time used to, because he was so popular with the young people. He was a very charismatic person. Had about six or seven children, and also was one of these open-hearted guys that always had lots of waifs and stray children adding to the family. Really lovely guy.
You folks may be interested to know that David only died about 2 years ago.
Oh,
Yeah, and in fact his last ever Eucharist was celebrated at St Faith's. I got to know him some years ago through another colleague in my previous parish, and when I heard that he had been curate here, and many people still remembered him with such affection, I said, you must come and do a Eucharist.
Yeah.
So it was a rather nice way to round off his life. It was very, very good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. In fact, had I known that, I would have come along because, one of those. He was he was such a lovely character.
Yeah.
Really, really superb. But yeah, thank you for telling that. And that's one in your church hall, with rather more of the people. And I think we finish up with this one. It's one that you're kind of well known. I think I've played around with it in Photoshop to brighten it up somewhat. But I really love it. I think it's not a photograph. I mean, it's a drawing. But isn't it atmospheric? Isn't it absolutely lovely? And we'll finish up with that. Thank you.
Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. That's been really, really fascinating. In fact, I have actually got about a dozen old photos of the church, if anybody would be interested to see them before we finish.
Oh, yes.
But before we do, I mean, thank you so much, Michael, for sharing.
That was very interesting.
It really was.
Thank you. Sorry, I've overrun on time a little bit.
It's all right. It's been fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
Very good.
It's brought back a few memories, Michael, that's for sure.
I thought it would.
Well, if anyone needs to go, we quite understand. But if you are interested, there's just about, as I say, about a dozen photos. So if I can just get them moving here.
You want to see these?
Can you see them?
Yes.
Yes, you can see that, can you?
Yes.
Jolly good. Excellent. Now what I've got to do is find out how I can move on. Here we are. Right. So I'm guessing from that motorcycle that this is probably about 1920, something like that. I think I can make it a bit bigger. There we are.
That's it.
Yeah.
It looks like a Scot to me.
Looks like a what?
A Scot.
A Scot. You could well be right. You could well be right. Yeah.
It was a water cooled.
Okay. Yeah. That one there. Yes. Whereas this picture here, this one I always find really mind blowing because it's just so different from how the church looks now. It looks kind of small and dark, whereas these days it looks a lot bigger and brighter.
Just check.
Yes, chairs. Before, yes, I like to show people that sometimes. Those who think that our pews have been there since Noah, I like to remind them they were only brought in the 1970s. That's a rather nice shot. That's from Homewell. So that's the path that runs down from Homewell down to the old house at home, and all the children crowded in there. And these are just some other random shots that I've picked up. I note here the railings all along in front of the church, which I presume were got rid of in the war as part of the war effort.
Yes.
And another, again, undated, I'm afraid. These are just shots that people have sent me over the years. But
It's before memorial, wasn't it?
that was before the war, yes.
Before the memorial.
Yeah.
And before the memorial, yes. So this would be turn of the century, wouldn't it?
It must be.
Yeah. And that certainly is before the war memorial, and one would guess that it was a Remembrance Day parade of some description immediately after the First World War.
I should think, yes.
And I think that's another shot of the same occasion. This is even older because you've got horse and carts everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
So one might assume this was perhaps a wedding or some grand occasion that took place outside the church in the days of horse and carts.
And the chap with his hat.
I didn't quite catch that. Say again?
The chap on the coach with his bowler hat.
Oh, yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, this fellow here. Yes. And another one here with a rather splendid carriage.
It's probably Sir Dimmock White's family.
Could be.
Yes, yes, as you say.
And isn't it interesting that the trees are still, even that early, look, being pollarded like they are now?
Yes, that's right. Yes. And that they're still about the same size
Yes.
when they are pollarded, isn't
Yeah.
it? They've managed to keep them from, I suppose, from going rampant
Yeah.
through regular pollarding. Another street scene. You can see the Bear Hotel up there
Hmm.
in the corner.
Somebody looking out the window.
Yeah. And a march past of some description, perhaps May Day.
Yes.
The trees are out in leaf, so one would assume that was perhaps a May Day celebration. Perhaps that's an old tradition we ought to try and revive. Get everybody marching through the town again on May Day. And of course, this is interesting. This section here, where the vicar appears to be peeking out from the vestry, because this is now where our choir vestry is. That was built after the war, I think in the late 20s. And there is a picture coming up showing the old steps up to the belfry. That again is before the war memorial.
Yes.
And another, undated, but with a horse and cart. And I'm just, stop me if you want me to slow down on any of these, but again, an old one with railings and quite a high wall. And another. It's obviously been much loved and photographed over the years, as dear old St. Faith.
And the clock goes.
And that one's very grainy. And there's the war memorial.
Yes, yes.
And I believe this was taken on the day when it was first inaugurated. Because noticeably it doesn't have the Second World War memorials that are now arranged along the bottom level.
Yes.
And that, this one is dated September the 30th, 1922, the unveiling of Havant War Memorial. So there you go, a definitive date.
Yeah.
Well, that's after the First War, isn't it?
Yes. Interesting that they didn't wait till November to do it. They decided they'd do it once they'd got it up and running, I suppose. And there's another shot from the same occasion. And the same. And again, after everybody's gone away. Wouldn't it be lovely if we had that many flowers all over it these days? That would just be marvellous, wouldn't it? And that's obviously with the memorial in place. And another. And another. I'm sorry, there's a few more than a dozen. I lied.
You're a man after my heart.
Yeah. Men on their bicycles all heading off down the road. I rather like that one. That's the shot I took that one in at the back of the Royal Oak. They have that on the exit to the garden from the Royal Oak. It's undated, but it hasn't changed from whenever it was taken. And then that was just a book of postcards that somebody showed me. That's got again that old picture with the horse and cart. Oh, that's the rectory. I thought that might be of interest. You showed us where the road down to the rectory went.
Yes, yeah.
And that's what it looked like.
Yes.
I'm rather glad I don't have to pay the heating bills on that building, I have to say.
Yeah. Can I say that if you do have me again, got a Havant miscellany, and I've got pictures of the rectory.
Oh, great. So that would be fascinating. That would be great. There's some of the old clergy all gathered.
Oh.
We're not quite sure where. Oh, and that's that picture you showed, Mike, but with colour. It is, so, as you say, it's so evocative, isn't it?
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah. And that was that's the old staircase up to the belfry.
Yes.
There we go. So this is now a choir vestry with a flat roof over the top. But it was a rather splendid entrance to the belfry, I think.
Oh, yes.
And I'm always intrigued by this one. It must be a very early photograph, because it shows this extremely high wall around the churchyard.
Yeah.
And it also shows these very strange shutters over the bell chamber.
Yes, and the trees are quite short, aren't they?
Yes, they are. That's true.
Look at
Yes.
the trees.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's an internal shot. And there's your chairs again.
Yeah.
And these marvellous light fittings. Look at all these chains hanging down. Presumably they were gas lamps and the chains were to ignite them in some way or turn them off.
To lower them.
Or lower them, perhaps. Yes, could be.
So it had to be big.
Yeah. But this photograph was before the Lady Chapel, which was again about in the 1920s. Some splendid candelabras up there by the altar. I think I should reinstitute those, actually. They look rather good. And that's the last one, I think, just a painting that somebody had done, which I chucked into my collection. So there you go. Just thought those are the shots I've got. I just thought you might be interested to see them. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Mike, for your tremendous presentation. And yes, I'm sure we'd love to do another afternoon of Havant miscellany.
Yes, don't forget to invite me. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, very much.
Well,
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you, Tom, for those last few. It was lovely.
Barry in a couple of weeks' time.
yes, that would be great.
No, I was saying for Valerie, I'm wishing her well.
Oh yes,
Oh, thank
indeed.
you.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, Valerie. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
There'll be
Yeah.
praise, I can promise.
You're the first people to know.
Well, we feel very honoured.
Well, you just clicked in at the right time.
Yeah. Well, good for you, and good luck. I hope it goes well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you one and all.
Thank
The fundraiser in me is compelled to simply say that Mike has given his services to us
Yes.
for free this afternoon. And if you fancy making a donation to St Faith's via the donations page of our website, then of course it will always be appreciated and will be used to carry on improving the church. But that's all I'm going to say. But bless you. Bless you,
Thank
Mike,
you all.
for your time.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
bless you
again.
all.
Thank you, everybody.
Go and have his beer now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you deserve it.
Ken, when they've just gone, can I just have a quick private word
With me?
with you? Yeah.
Yes, certainly. Yes. So we'll say goodbye to everybody else.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, bye, everybody.
Bye, one and all.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.
A great pleasure. Bye.
Right. Well,
Hang
all
on.
I-
Hang on, Mike. Hang on, Mike. We've still got a couple of folks.
well, it doesn't matter too much, but
Okay.
it's not enough